Okay, hello, good afternoon, everyone. My presentation will not speak about ayahuasca, but it will be relevant to the discussion of the legal implications of prosecution of people who are in the possession of well, we can do without the slides.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we could. It is not essential. I have it in my computer, but it's
No, but
just
USB.
no. I don't have a USB. What I will do is present briefly a policy paper that TNI has produced together with the IDPC about scheduling in the international drug control system. This paper has been published in June, and I have copies here in both English and Spanish for everyone who wants to have one. The idea is that after my presentation you all run to get a copy and start reading immediately. But it is and it is not relevant for the discussion on the legal issue of ayahuasca, and I will explain later why. Basically, why is scheduling an important issue in the international drug control system? Scheduling refers to the classification of a substance within a graded system of controls and restrictions, which are the core of the functioning of the international drug control system. But it has also become a topic of strains and tensions in the past decades, referring to different substances and different discussions. And it has become a debate that has started to question the orientation of the regime, of the current prohibition regime. This is related to the fact that the conventions, the international drug conventions that we are now currently applicated in almost all countries in the world, have two core goals. One goal is restrictive. It is meant to limit the access to controlled drugs and prevent manufacture production for use as pleasure, recreation and entertainment, religious or whatever. In the convention it talks about non-medical use. So that's the restrictive part. And the other core goal of the convention is to ensure the availability of controlled drugs for medicinal and scientific uses. Basically, the art of good drug control is to strike the right balance between these two objectives. But as we all know, historically, the focus of drug control has been on repression. So the restrictive part of the treaties have dominated drug policies. Another reason why it's important and why it is relevant to talk about scheduling is because of the emergence of new forms of drugs and the so-called new psychoactive substances that have emerged in the past decades. It has given a new impetus to the issue of scheduling, and it has given rise to a perception among states and governments that there's a threat because of the emergence of these enormous amount of new substances that are unknown currently in the system. Most states are critical of the current procedures, and it it doesn't respond to the fact that these markets of new substances are really fast changing, and the procedures to classify or control a drug are very slow. Both the 1961 Single Convention and the 1971 Psychotropic Convention. Oh, sorry. Have permit the scheduling of a substance pending an assessment of the WHO. So while the procedures to assess if a substance is needed to be controlled, both the conventions permit countries or parties to the conventions to take discretionary and mandatory provisional control measures. That's referring to the 1961 convention, and to the 1971 convention it's only discretionary controls. The WHO is the institution which is a fundamental part of the international drug control system, and its expert committee on drug dependence, it's the ECDD, is the instance that is doing the review of substances to see if they need to be controlled. But it's clear that there's some kind of regulatory panic at this moment. The last CND, the 57th CND last year, this year in March, there was a very clear example when the UK announced that they were going to control methadone, one of these new psychoactive substances. But there's quite a confusion about the role of the UN drug control bodies, specifically the INCB and the WHO, but also the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. There is a general trend going on to marginalize the WHO in their role as being the important representing the healthcare principle within the drug control system. They have been cut back in funds. There have been a really lack of human and technical resources made available to them. And that's being felt in the whole process of substances and reviews of substances. For example, the expert committee should convene every 2 years according to the conventions. But the last meeting was held last June after 6 years of not being coming together. And that's just because of the fact that nobody funds their meetings. The ECDD is the technical body that undertakes the schedule proposals and the reviews. And there's very little attention given to this problem from governments in general. This isolation and marginalization started in the 90s when the program of substance abuse was created and started to do reviews of substances that had not been reviewed for a long time, such as cocaine and cannabis. But the outcomes were controversial. And in the preparation of the UNGAS in 1998, the program and the WHO were pushed to the periphery, mainly by the United States. This same trend is also happening in scheduling. Health principle is not being taken serious in the procedures. The background of the scheduling principle, starting mainly in the beginning of the 20th century, by a group of states that had vested interest in the control in trade and geopolitical and cultural dominance. The current drug control system is a reflection of that. It's very important to realize that the definition of what is and what is not a drug is to be considered in this light. The fact that tobacco, alcohol are not part of the current drug control system is the best illustration of that. After World War II, scheduling became more complex. The 1961 convention has 4 schedules, which was one of the slides that I wanted to show you. And the 1971 has also got 4 schedules that divide the substances in different levels of control. One of the fundamental inconsistencies is that the 61 convention includes, and the 71 convention excludes, herbal raw material. The 1988 convention has also 2 tables with precursors for substance control. So these controls are bound to different legal treaty bodies. The WHO is the only agencies within the UN drug control system that is allowed to recommend scheduling, classifying of substances for the 61 convention. The INCB is the one that recommends for the 1971 convention. The 1971 convention is much more lenient in controls. It is clearly a result of being negotiated by governments thinking about their pharmaceutical industries in the negotiations. The preference for synthetic above natural drugs and the tight restriction on drugs of the people of Asia, Africa and Latin America, whereas there's more flexibility on synthetic drugs, is a clear expression of that. Recreational Western drugs are not placed under control, and this is causing a real problem for the WHO. Now, the basic principles for classification for substances under the 61 and the 71 conventions are called the Similarity Principle. This principle means that every drug that's being considered for review or control has to have similar effects as the one that are already under control. So cannabis, cocaine or opium-like effects. But the 61 has also another principle, which is the Convertibility Principle. So if a substance is easily convertible into a substance that is already under control, it is considered to be liable for control. There's been no reviews of these substances in the past decades. Heroin was in the last time it was reviewed by a health-oriented instance was 1949, and cocaine and coca and cannabis in 1965. So since the WHO has this mandate to review and recommend the inclusion or changes for classification, the question is, what happens if they do? The paper has a few examples of substances and the way it has been recommended by the WHO and presented to the Commission on Narcotic Drugs that may be interesting to hear about. One of them is ketamine. As you know, an anesthetic that is in most of the developing world the only anesthetic available. But because of its use in different contexts and in Western Europe particularly, I don't know in the United States, but in Western Europe, many countries have started to ask for its inclusion in control schemes. The paper explains what happened exactly and how the WHO tried to avoid these controls, but that the decision of the Commission was different. So these review processes, which was another slide I had, was very nice. It's also in the paper, so you can take a look. It can be started by the WHO itself, it can be started by a party, it can be started by the Secretary General. And these recommendations that come out of these reviews go to the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, and they can either decide or otherwise what to do with these recommendations. What they do is assess the medical properties and its liability for abuse. So, unauthorized use in the language of the conventions. It needs to balance between medical availability against adverse health consequences. So these assessments are done by the WHO, the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence. There's 2 different types of reviews. Everything is explained in the paper. If you want to know more details, please read there. I have how much more? 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. There are a lot of conceptual and classification problems about the current system of control. Even only look at the names of the conventions. The 1961 convention is called the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, and it includes both a stimulant and a hallucinogenic, and an opium, coca, and marijuana are the 3 plants where it's built around. And the 71 convention is called the Psychotropic Convention, but it includes also all sorts of different substances that cannot be grouped within so easily as they pretend to do. So apart from these problems, there's also this really important notion of pharmacological determination. It's within the control system, there's no such thing as taking into account the broader perspective of the use of a substance into more sociological or other factors that play a role in the use of a substance. I think maybe the only case that might be relevant for ayahuasca, because as far as I know, no government has asked for the classification of ayahuasca into the international control system. But as we have heard here, there's many attempts to control at the national level. Maybe the only example that is also mentioned here in the paper that might be as a warning system for ayahuasca and its future is the case of cut. Cut is I don't know if you all know what's cut, but it's chewed and it's being used for centuries mainly in the Horn of Africa. And it's been under the attention of the UN drug control system since 1936. It has been reviewed several times by the WHO. It has been proposed for controls by several countries into the UN drug control system. And every time the conclusions of the WHO were that it is not recommendable to include controls, but it should be dealt with through education and through information. But still, my country, for example, the Netherlands, but also the UK, have recently prohibited cut, as many other countries in the world have done. So it's no guarantee that it's not included, that it's not going to be produced, but it should be clear that it's formally not part of the drug control system or let's say governments that prohibit these substances are in fact going outside of their territory. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll take some questions.